In the beginning was the Word. Biblical studies is about studying the Word of God. What does that mean in practice? What sort of word are we dealing with? In 1860, Benjamin Jowett famously wrote that we should interpret the Bible like any other book. Is that the case? Or is there something special about the Bible that means we should read and interpret it in a different way? Well, let's just play with that idea for a moment. It's a lovely sunny day today and I'm sitting out here in the shade in the garden, and I've got various bits of reading material with me because I'm at work. I've actually got the college prospectus here, and this is going to tell me, if I didn't already know, all about the modules that we offer, the kind of people who come and study at St. Augustine's, and the requirements for various different programs of study. On my phone, I've got various emails that people have sent to me, some of which are very long and others of which are very short. Because I'm on my lunch break, I've got a bit of light reading as well. I've actually got the big book of football's funniest quotes here. Let's just pick one out at random. Dave Bassett said, "I honestly believe we can go all the way to Wembley unless somebody knocks us out." Bit of profound wisdom for us there. Oh, and tucked inside that, on a little scrappy post-it, I've got my to-do list of things that I need to remember to do this afternoon. And because I'm going to service my car at the weekend, I've got the Haynes manual here to remind me how to change my brake pads. Not all things get written down, and there may be other sorts of word, of course. I might read a bedtime story. I might tell the story of Cinderella to my children as I'm putting them to bed. And I wouldn't be reading that, I'd be doing it from memory. But it's still a type of word. And those different types of writing or speaking all need to be understood in different ways. I wouldn't read the Haynes manual, for example, and expect it to tell me the same sorts of things that I would expect to find in the prospectus or in an email from a colleague. And certainly when it comes to football's funniest quotes, they're going to be very different indeed, usually because the whole point is I expect them to be funny and therefore have a fairly loose relationship to my understanding of reality. So one of the key skills for us in reading anything, and we do this all the time, whether we're thinking about it or not, is to pay attention to the kind of thing that we are reading, or the genre of it, to give it a fancy word, so that we interpret it appropriately. So for example, if I go to my emails and I find an email from my colleague Guido that says, "Dear Simon, I think you can just get on and do whatever you want. That's fine. Thanks for all your help." I would know that that email only makes sense as a reply to something that we've discussed earlier. And doing whatever I want, I would interpret as being in relation to the subject of those earlier emails, not in relation to life in general. So we're always paying attention to the genre, the type of story, the type of writing, the type of instruction that we're dealing with. And when Jowett said we should read the Bible like any other book, that's what he was encouraging us to do, to recognize that even within the Bible, there are various different types of literature. There's poetry, there is story, there's legend, there's parable, there are love songs, there are praises, there are prophecies. And these all have their own unique characteristics. And the more that we can understand and appreciate the characteristics of each one, the more likely we are to interpret and make use of that particular form of writing appropriately and usefully. And I can illustrate that with one simple application, and that's to think for a moment about truth. Where is truth found? And how is truth conveyed? Now, I'd like to suggest that all of these types of communication, types of writing that I've got or that I've mentioned here, all contain truth. but they do so in different ways. The email from Guido telling me that I can do whatever I like is true in a limited context in relation to the topic of an earlier email exchange. The Haynes manual is true in that it accurately describes the function of one particular car, but it's useless if you try and use it in relation to a different car. The prospectus for the college is true in that it gives accurate information about the courses we're offering next year, but within a year this will not be true. This will be completely out of date. Is there any truth at all in a bizarre quotation from a football manager? One might wonder. Well, there might be truth in that it's an accurate record of what that particular person said at a certain time, but what they said is not true in any recognizable sense. Or on the other hand, it might be so true that it's useless. We'll go all the way to Wembley unless someone knocks us out. Well, that's true, but it doesn't really tell you anything that you didn't already know. And then if we think about fairy tales or fiction in general, stories in general, there can be truth there, but it's a different sort of truth. If I tell my children the story of Cinderella, it's certainly not true that there was ever anyone called Cinderella, or who had a fairy godmother who turned a pumpkin into horse and carriages, or that there was a glass slipper that fitted her and her alone. But there is something true about goodness overcoming badness. There is something true about the course of true love never being smooth. Or to put it in the words of Jane Austen, there is a truth universally acknowledged that a good man in possession of a fortune is in want of a wife. And the whole novel of Pride and Prejudice, which is a work of fiction, is an entirely made up story, is a way of conveying that truth, a way of illustrating it. And so the way in which truth is contained in different sorts of writing varies depending on the type of writing or the type of communication that we're dealing with. So one of the things that we will do in our Introduction to Biblical Studies is to explore the different genres of biblical writing, to think about how we interpret them appropriately, bearing in mind their different purposes, and we might think a little bit about the different ways in which truth can be embodied and communicated through various different sorts of writing, even if some of those forms of writing are fictional.